So my recommendation is to start by doing all your brainstorming. Figure out your end game or end games. Figure out a list of objectives, maybe between 3 and 6 objectives or however many you want. And then brainstorm the tactics that you can do, the actions you can take to actually achieve those objectives. And start there. You've got a big picture. But most likely, if you're anything like me at least, you will have a lot of options, a lot of different things that you could be doing. And you might have noticed, but we are all just one person. If you are very fortunate to have an entire team, then for you, I recommend to take all of the different tactics and assign them to different people on your team. Okay? But for the rest of us, who we are just one person trying to build a career as an author, we need to look at all of these different things we could be doing and decide which ones we're actually going to do, because we just can't do everything. We have limited time, we have limited money, and we really need to be spending the majority of our time writing and not marketing. So what exactly are we going to do? And so I created a system for vetting. So the first step of my vetting system is to eliminate things. And I have a pretty simple system for doing this. So the first thing I eliminate is anything that I hate doing. So read through all of your tactics and say, is there anything on this list of things that I brainstormed that I really despise, that I really don't enjoy, and that saps out of all of my energy? And just cross all of those things off the list. I don't like Twitter, for example. So I have a Twitter account, and you might notice me tweeting occasionally, but that's actually not me. That's my social media manager, who I recently hired. She's the one doing all the tweeting. I hate Twitter, and it was one of the first things that I crossed off my list 3 years ago, well before I hired anyone to help me. I just don't enjoy it. So cross off anything you don't like. I also cross off things involving extensive math. Now, I have added math back in slowly because I do really think that some of the things that require math are valuable and helpful. But early on, when I was still figuring out what I should and shouldn't be doing, I got rid of any math heavy stuff because I don't like that. So cross off anything that you hate doing. I will also say that I have a friend who she and I are exact opposites, and we talk about this a lot. She actually crossed off everything that involved speaking in front of a camera. She crossed off everything that involved content marketing and just developing content for the internet. And she actually focused all of her time and energy on data and math because that's what she likes doing. So cross off everything that you don't like doing. The second thing I do is I eliminate anything I can't afford to do. Now, I want to mention here that you should have a budget. You are building a business, and people invest in businesses. And that might be $10 a month, and that's okay. It might be $100 a month, and that's okay. I know a lot of big authors are spending 10 grand a month on paid advertising, and most of us don't have the capacity to do that. You will have to spend money to run a successful business, and that's perfectly normal and reasonable. And anybody that talks about it being not legitimate if somebody spent money in order to make money doesn't know anything about business. You invest in your business to make money, okay? So you should have a budget. But I totally get that not everybody has huge budgets. My budget's not huge, but you should have some budget, but cross off anything that you can't afford. So I actually looked up how much it costs to buy a billboard. It's like $2,500 just to rent a billboard for a month. And then of course you have to pay for like the design of the billboard and all that stuff. And I was like, no way. I could publish 3 books or 4 books for the amount of money it would eventually take me to do that. So it makes more sense for me to publish those books and not pay for a billboard. So definitely cross off anything that you can't afford. The third thing I do is I eliminate anything that doesn't fit in with my brand promise. And so you can take my course on developing a brand if you want to. But keep in mind, what are you telling your readers you're going to give them? What is your brand promising? Is it promising fun, sexy stories? Is it promising exploration of ideas or exploration of space? What are you promising to the people who are going to be buying your products? And does that marketing activity, is it going to enable you to fulfill that brand promise? An example of what not to do. My brand promise is that I promise to explore ideas. If I posted pictures of sexy dudes on motorcycles, that does not fit in any way with my brand promise. And I might attract romance readers, but I would not attract sci-fi readers. In the same way, a romance writer should post those pictures if it fits in with their brand promise, because they're reaching out and they're connecting with people who are also going to actually like to read their books, right? So that's the third thing, is I eliminate anything that doesn't fit in with my brand promise. The fourth thing that I do is I eliminate anything that hasn't worked in the past. Now, this one is a little bit finicky because I first have to say to myself, why didn't it work in the past? And so I had, for my first series, my old covers were awful. And so I sort of had to look and say, like, well, maybe the reason nothing worked was because my covers were terrible. So you do have to be a little bit careful and be like, why didn't this work? Is it because my covers were terrible, or was it because I didn't do a good job, or I didn't know what I was doing, or it was just a bad tactic? So for me, posting in Facebook groups, links to my book, spamming Facebook groups isn't a tactic that has ever worked for me with any book cover or anything. And so I don't do that anymore. That's just permanently off my list. So I eliminate things that just don't work, period. And I can do this though because I have tried a lot of different things and I've experimented with a lot of different things. And so depending on where you are in your process, this might not be relevant to you yet. But if you know for a fact that something doesn't work, then just, don't do it. And then the fifth thing is that I eliminate anything I don't have time to do. So for example, launching a YouTube channel might actually be really fun. And I have all of the skills and resources to do it. I have all the technology, clearly. I have my light and I have my mic and I have my camera. I have the technology to do it and I have the skills to do it. But it would be incredibly time consuming. And so I'm not going to do that. I might put this course on YouTube, for example. But I'm not gonna go out of my way to create a YouTube channel because it's gonna be a huge time sink and I would rather spend that time writing. So again, you can use these as guidelines. You can even create your own tactics, vetting tactics, whatever your personal opinions are, or, whatever your own personal process is. Maybe you have other restrictions, like you work full time, or you're maybe a very private person. And so you opt never to do anything that shows your face or forces you to be on video. Maybe maybe you have medical issues that make it so that you can't do Comic-Cons, for example. So these are my vetting tactics. Definitely create your own if you think that's relevant, and definitely eliminate anything that doesn't work for you. The second part of this is prioritization of tactics. You've brainstormed them all. You've gotten rid of anything that you don't like, can't afford to do, or whatever. But most likely you still have a pretty good number of things that you could be doing left over. So the next step is prioritizing. Which ones do you focus on first? So I have, again, a system that I use. The first step in the system requires that you have brainstormed tactics for all of your objectives. What I do is I say, are there any tactics that are applicable to multiple objectives? Does that make sense? So let's say you have 2 different objectives. One of them is get 100 new eyes on my books every month. And the other one is to publish my book in as many formats and with as many distributors as possible. Well, publishing your book with more distributors is going to make your books more accessible to more people, which means that more people are going to be likely to see them. So a tactic might be distribute my book through Barnes and Noble for both of those objectives. And so that is going to be a priority. You want to do that before you do other things because it applies to both objectives, so it's more efficient. In fact, that's why I did Comic-Cons for so long, because Comic-Cons, back in the beginning of my marketing strategy, Comic-Cons were applicable to, I think, 5 out of my 6 objectives. So then the next thing is that I ask myself, are any of these more applicable to my end game than any of the others? So if your end game is creating body positive literature, and one of your tactics is posting body positivity memes and inspiring quotes, maybe you prioritize that tactic because it is very directly relevant to your end game. The third thing I do is I prioritize anything that I'm already doing. Now, my guess is that if you're taking this course, you've already started dabbling in marketing a little bit. So there's no reason to just quit doing everything that you're already doing unless it's not working. Instead, say, well, I already have a Facebook page and I'm already posting content. So I'm going to prioritize that as one of my tactics because it's clearly applicable to one of my objectives or 2 of my objectives. So I'm just going to keep doing it for now, as opposed to learning a completely new platform or a completely new thing. And then the fourth thing is that I prioritize tactics that require skills that I already have. So for example, I already know how to make videos, so maybe I prioritize making a YouTube video, although I know I just said I wouldn't do that for other reasons, or doing Facebook Live or doing podcast interviews, that kind of thing, because I already have the skills and I already have the technology and the resources to be able to do that. But you know what I don't know how to do? Design stuff in Photoshop. So I'm not going to put making elaborate Photoshop illustrations as one of my tactics. I'm not going to do that because that would require me to learn a whole bunch of skills that I don't already have. So if you already have the resources or the tools or the skills to do something, prioritize that tactic because it's going to save you time and energy. That's not to say that you shouldn't learn new things because you absolutely should. I'm a huge fan of learning new things. All I'm saying is that you should prioritize the things that you already know how to do because it'll save you time, it'll save you energy, and those things will probably turn out nicer because you have the skills to do them, right? So how many tactics you choose to implement or focus on at once is up to you. It depends on your time and on your lifestyle and your personal priorities and what resources you have available to you. But ultimately, every tactic, every action that you take should point back to an objective, which should point back to your end game.